Welcome. Thank you for tuning to NeptuneKnives. I own a couple of the Cold Steel Mini Tough Lights because it's such a practical knife. Whether it be in the drafting room when I'm working on the knife design, I can cut stencils, paper, to then even in a medical kit, brand new, never been used, it makes a good razor. And the Spyderco Dodo has similar features. An emphasis on being practical, lightweight, compact, not too thick of a profile. And then the same kind of focus on more grip and control over the blade. That handle to blade ratio. And this is one of the few knives that I consider a collector's piece and I keep in my collection. It's got a unique grip, a unique lock, and plus the carbon fiber makes this limited edition run even more special. In terms of construction, the Dodo has a decent blade stock. Compared to the Mini Tough Light, both are hollow ground. Catch that on camera. And but the Dodo here has S30V as the steel, which means it's going to have better edge retention. So you're going to do more cutting with the Dodo, and it's a 1mm thicker starting. So it does have more of a focus on being a utility blade, something you can use every day and for more variety of tasks, but it kind of does lose some purpose. It does push it further away from what the cold steel is, which is a nice clean razor. This one's going to have more performance in cutting boxes and things like that. So I definitely would say that the cold steel is more purpose built, while the Dodo is more of an artistic piece. The carbon fiber here is real carbon fiber, unlike some of the other Spydercos, which have like a G10 with a sticker on top. This one actually does feel like wood, so it's a really nice feeling, and it's very light. Like it almost feels like it's paper or cardboard. Carbon fiber can splinter like wood. I'm very familiar with this on my car. If I bottom out and that front spoiler hits the ground, it tends to shatter and it forms little splinters even. So it's not correct to take carbon fiber and make it very thin. A lot of handle scales on some tactical knives or just even other collector's pieces. This is the proper way. You want to leave a good thickness here so that the carbon fiber is durable enough to handle impact. And I think that's why there aren't any bevels. All the corners are smooth and rounded, but I'm pretty sure that's the reason why there's no actual contouring and bevels. Because if it did have bevels like that, it would definitely make all the corners weaker and possibly break if you drop it. But then there's also that design factor that if you take such a organic design, lots of curves, and then you add even 3D contouring, it's going to make it look too organic, and I think that's not what Spyderco really usually represents. And if you did that, it would also kind of lose some of the classiness that this has. I do worry about the carbon fiber shattering right here because of that countersink for the pocket clip screw. I don't know how much carbon fiber is being held in, and it definitely is a weak point. And then on top of that, you have just this one jeweler screw and then one here. So it doesn't really have, I would say, a lot of structural rigidity. Like the carbon fiber is solid, and you do have 2 points of contact, but usually folders and knives have 2 screws back here to kind of create a triangle. This one's up here, so overall you torque it too much, these screws can bust, that carbon fiber could break. But it's not really meant for that. It's supposed to be a gentleman's folder. And for me, this really is sort of like Spyderco's version of a Sebenza. It has its own unique action. It's not smooth all the way throughout, which makes the lock method feel a little clunky, but it's not going to snap on your fingers either. You don't have to worry about it dropping down on you. And you do feel the spring the whole time behind the lock. But what I like about this seal is that it's representing Spyderco's methodology. I mean, it's got a functional spider hole, and it's got that creative Spyderco design, and then a unique lock. The blade does come paper cutting sharp, but the actual grind is coarse on the secondary bevel. As you can tell, the little details right here the grind lines are kind of jumping around. And how they got sharp is they put a nice clean micro bevel on it. And this is acceptable because of what I've seen and from my experience of doing hawk-shaped blades. It's easier when you have a more coarse belt because it just quickly takes off material, and if you move fast, you can kind of get to blend smoothly. And that's probably the most hand-done aspect of this knife, is that someone did have to put it up to a grinder and do that edge. So you can see it's not perfect, but for what it is, it's definitely on par. I do wish that the backspacer was slightly inset, like it was slightly underneath the two carbon fiber scales, because then when you're holding it you wouldn't feel that steel there, because it definitely does kind of take away from that nice feel of carbon fiber. And there's a lot of control over the knife, even though there's no bevels, but you do feel the knife in your hand, especially here and here. You do feel that. And the only option would be, again, to have a G10 version have bevels. But again, then that would take away from what this knife is. And it might seem like it would be a concern that you have this stainless steel kind of smooth, slick pocket clip, and same thing with the carbon fiber scale. But because of the very light weight, it doesn't really push itself out of the pocket. So I haven't had any issues of it falling out. Now in terms of design, I've asked some people, what does this look like to you? And most people say it does remind them of a bird. When usually they say then it doesn't really intimidate them, like visually it's something friendly. And if that's something you want, that's a good thing then. I personally like folding knives that don't have a point to stab with, because then it takes away any issues of whether or not the lock can hold up, or whether or not your hand can slide up the blade. For example, on the Sebenza Insigno, I prefer that version more. Because definitely this type of blade makes you feel like you want to slash more, and I think that's just safer with a folding knife. Recurves aren't very functional, and you won't really notice it on a small blade. On a large blade, it has a function. You know, you could have a large knife, for example, if it was this way, and you know, this could be a very wide, it could aggressively taper and get thick again, so that when you hit, maybe it would chop and split the wood, and then you could have the inside curve be very fine and be good at like small cutting tasks. You know, so a recurve on a large blade, you can play with the geometry. On a small blade, realistically, when you slash, you're just using basically this tip. I mean, it kind of all blends into one straight razor, same thing as this. So it's definitely more just for artistry, but the tip is still very good at piercing into any type of packaging, and you can pull in many directions, and you got good control. If you were to wave mod this knife, it actually makes a good karambit. For example, you have reversible pocket clip, so if I switch it this side and put it in reverse, you know, pull it out, you would deploy that way, and then you basically have that. So it's kind of funny, I mean, and it has a solid grip. I mean, a really solid grip, how this part stays in your palm, prevents that top portion from moving around, and then you have this kind of uber grip down here, all four fingers. So in terms of that, it would make a decent fighting knife. Now, it does taper towards the clip point, which is a little problematic when you carry it then, because it can turn over in your pocket because this portion up here gets so narrow. I mean, this portion is wide, but within your pocket it can still do this. The slick carbon fiber again, and the pocket clip, when you're grabbing it, this thumb is trying to grab onto this surface, and these fingers trying to pull on the pocket clip. It's not so graceful trying to pull the knife out of a pocket sometimes, especially if your pants are thicker. Okay, and you see I can flick it. If I give it a very aggressive flick, even a slight wrist motion, but to be honest, it just isn't really meant for that. You can see what happens is this, and the typical thing someone is likely to want to do is do that. And sometimes if it just doesn't land right, I think it's a little dangerous. I think at some point you're not going to pay attention and injure yourself. So in my opinion, just traditional opening, or maybe messing around with a wave, is the best way to deploy this knife. So one of the key features is how much leverage you can get. You have all four fingers controlling it, and then you have the smaller blade stays close to your hand, so you can really push through a cut like as if you're punching. And even though the carbon fiber is slick, even if your hands are wet, the knife is still secure. It just doesn't feel so much. I will say that, because the carbon fiber is so smooth, it doesn't feel always in control, but it still definitely locks in. It's a strange combination. Unfortunately, in terms of fighting with the blade, it does sit far back. I mean, if you do this type of motion, that's good. If you do this though, you can see it's very far back. It's not like out that way. So your reach is definitely limited. And plus it's predominantly a slashing type of knife. So the effectiveness of this type blade is going to depend on where you live, what the other person's wearing. Slashing through a thick jacket or just slashing through a t-shirt, two different things. But with this hook shape, it's gonna grab the meat and push through it. So you're still gonna get really deep slashes with even such a small blade shape. And the choil is definitely there, but where it sits in relation to your finger, so far no issues of it snagging. Final thoughts. As a knife, it's not superior in any way at any specific task, but it has a friendly appeal to it. It's legal in most states to carry, and it is a beautiful looking product. I like customs, but sometimes they're just a little too gratuitous. This is a nice balance. It really displays how creative Spyderco is. And as a utility and self-defense blade, it will really depend on your willingness to use it in those applications. I mean, it's got the grip, it has an aggressive blade, and it's just slightly inhibiting on the deployment. But for me, I'm always keeping one in my small collection next to my XM 3-inch flipper and a small Sebenza. So, thank you.